On the brisk morning of February 17th, 2026, the golden sunlight of Windsor Castle's spires spilled across St. George's Hall, illuminating centuries of royal history with a quiet, commanding authority. Beneath the vaulted ceiling, steeped in the echoes of generations of monarchy, Prince William, Prince of Wales and acting sovereign, approached the gilded lectern with a calm yet resolute presence. He had not come to deliver a routine ceremonial address. Today was a reckoning, a crystallization of power, principle, and the enduring weight of legacy. Every eye in the hall was fixed upon him, senior advisors, legal minds, palace officials, and the few accredited members of the press who had been granted access to witness history unfold firsthand. Today, he began, his voice steady, resonant, and without hesitation. The House of Windsor declares the opening of a new chapter. Silence rippled through the room, like a taut string pulled to its limit. A chapter, William continued, defined by clarity, by duty, and by the unyielding discipline required to protect our institution. We are not a dynasty of sentiment. We are a dynasty of stewardship. The weight of his words was deliberate. This was the unveiling of Royal Order No. 17, a monumental directive that had been months in preparation, a confluence of legal scrutiny, emotional sacrifice, and intricate political strategy within the monarchy itself. The order had been drafted under the careful guidance of Princess Anne, Lord Alistair Pembroke, and Duchess Sophie, and it had received unanimous approval from the Royal Family Tribunal just 2 days prior, on February 15th. Its primary mandate was unmistakable. Prince Harry was formally barred from returning to any official royal role. Beyond that, all titles, heraldic privileges, and rights previously held by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were indefinitely suspended. It froze any connection to inheritance or assets within the Crown estate tied to the Sussex branch. William's words struck with unmistakable precision. If the monarchy could summon the courage to remove Andrew for the survival of the crown, we must also summon the courage to protect that crown from further erosion. This statement harkened back to King Charles III's decisive actions on October 30th, 2025, which stripped Prince Andrew of all titles and recast him under his private surname, Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor. More shocking still, Andrew had been displaced from Royal Lodge, a residence he had occupied under a 75-year lease since 2003. Despite assurances to Queen Elizabeth II that her son would not be moved during her lifetime, Charles acted decisively, prioritizing institutional integrity over family sentiment. Now, Andrew resided at Marsh Farm, a dilapidated, isolated cottage on the outer fringe of the Sandringham estate. It offered no private chapel, no staff quarters, and no active royal protection, a stark contrast to the lavish security and ceremonial privileges he had once enjoyed. William made it clear this was not exile. It was the birth of the doctrine of internal discipline, a principle that would now extend to Prince Harry. Harry had finalised his confidential divorce from Meghan Markle in January 2026, a private legal settlement that would soon erupt into public conflict. The couple's separation, though finalised in court, quickly gave rise to disputes over custody, digital image rights, and attempts at reputational control. Royal Order No. 17 confirmed what palace insiders had long suspected. There would be no exceptions for Harry. The monarchy would not bend for sentiment, celebrity status, or public sympathy. On February 10th, Lady Louise Windsor, working closely with royal legal officers, submitted a confidential 117-page dossier to the tribunal. It detailed inconsistencies in Archie and Lilibet's birth records across multiple jurisdictions, highlighted commercial agreements monetizing the children's images, and cited violations of international child protection protocols. Most sensationally, the report revealed that Meghan Markle had allegedly approved a media licensing deal for a children's series titled Sussex Kitchen, which would have featured the children as recurring characters. The revelations sent shockwaves through the Privy Council and legal advisers alike. Lord Pembroke later commented, "The Crown could no longer treat this as a personal matter. It became one of succession, of legitimacy, and of moral precedent." The February 15th order also introduced a transformative constitutional role. Princess Catherine and Duchess Sophie were appointed royal matrons, legal guardians, and custodians of Archie and Lilibet. In the event of parental incapacity or loss of custody, the children would not receive princely titles, but their legal rights, education, healthcare, and protection of their digital likeness would remain safeguarded by the Crown. William's public statement was firm and unflinching. "These are still children of Windsor. Their future will not be bartered in courts of public opinion, nor auctioned on entertainment platforms." Sources from Montecito reported that Prince Harry had privately reached out to Catherine's team, offering to relinquish full custodial rights in exchange for sealing divorce documents. His reported plea, "If I let go, will they finally be safe?" Meghan's legal team immediately filed objections on February 17th, attempting to block any transfer of guardianship without her direct consent, setting the stage for a high-stakes transatlantic legal battle. Despite the storm, William's tone remained measured and unwavering. "My duty is not to comfort discomfort, but to uphold legacy, not to reconcile the irreconcilable." The global press erupted. Headlines from Sydney to New York labelled it a constitutional rupture cloaked in calm authority. Within Britain, his approval rating surged to 84%. Morning Times editorialised bluntly, "He chose the Crown." Thus was born the Royal Reset Doctrine, a new constitutional strategy for a post-Elizabethan monarchy. William now stood as more than heir. He was a prince defined by clarity, courage, and command. The Royal Tribunal, the apex of this doctrine, shocked even seasoned palace observers. Unlike previous internal reviews, this was a body of full sovereign authority. Lord Pembroke, President of the Privy Council, declared publicly that this marked the first establishment of a sovereign family court in the British monarchy since the dissolution of the Plantagenet line. Its jurisdiction would include titles, access, representation, and child guardianship within the palace gates. Months of meticulous planning had preceded this moment. Catherine and Sophie had coordinated with education, child welfare, and security experts to ensure Archie and Lilibet's safety. Catherine's role as royal matron placed her at the centre of every decision regarding the children's upbringing. Pressed privately on the emotional burden, she responded, "This is not punishment, it is a shield. These children are not at fault for the ambitions of their parents." Sophie Wessex, acting Vice-Chancellor of Domestic Affairs, added, "Lineage cannot be selectively invoked when convenient and discarded when accountability arises across the Atlantic." As expected, Meghan's legal team objected, citing California jurisdiction. Pembroke countered, "While the tribunal acknowledges the children's physical location, their birth titles, past privileges, and public exposure are inseparably linked to the Crown. Legal authority follows that connection." Intelligence reports highlighted discrepancies in citizenship, schooling, and medical documentation, issues now investigated by both British and US authorities. Lady Louise's 93-page internal dossier further outlined inconsistencies and misrepresentations between public statements and institutional records. The session's final moment was symbolic, seismic, and historic. William stood before the tribunal holding two items: Queen Elizabeth II's sealed letter and Royal Order No. 17. Without reading aloud, he addressed the assembly. "She told me, 'Do not let duty become diluted by sentiment. You are not just their brother, you are heir to a nation.'" He placed the letter into the royal archives. "Let this mark the line, and let the children be protected from what follows." In a private audience, King Charles signed the writs for Andrew and Harry. Ink barely dry on Andrew's final expulsion, precedent was established. Behind the gates of Windsor, William convened a closed council with bloodline advisers and Lord Pembroke. On the table lay a dossier labelled Duke of Sussex Disciplinary Response, Phase 2. Your Majesty, set the tone with Andrew, William said calmly. Full accordance, no sentiment, no compromise, no exceptions. Pembroke nodded solemnly. It is now legal precedent that even a direct son of the sovereign, if deemed institutionally harmful, can be expelled without recourse. Silence engulfed the room, heavy with the gravity of the crown and the weight of history itself. A hush fell over the room as Anne cleared her throat, and the weight of her words seemed to press down on the gathered royals like the history of centuries itself. William's jaw tightened almost reflexively as memories of the Queen's final private warnings surged into his mind. Elizabeth had feared division above all, yet she feared weakness even more. She had never wavered in her resolve, never allowed sentiment to compromise the crown's dignity. Years earlier, she had confided in Anne and Charles that the continuity of the royal line could not be jeopardized by public scandal, and that humiliation within the family, no matter how emotionally charged, must never become spectacle. Her message had been subtle yet absolute. Strength, prudence, and discretion were the monarchy's most vital instruments. Those warnings, however, predated a storm that would test the institution in unprecedented ways. Meghan Markle's commercial enterprises had drawn criticism at home and abroad. Allegations of Netflix financial misconduct had circulated in legal and media circles, and now there was the looming spectre of custody disputes weaponized for leverage over Archie and Lilibet. Andrew's downfall had set a contemporary precedent. Accountability and discipline could and would be applied without regard for familial affection. William, steeled by that lesson, prepared to enforce the same doctrine on Harry, a decision that required both strategic foresight and political resolve. A confidential memorandum, drafted with meticulous care, was sent to the Ministry of Justice under conditions of strict secrecy. It outlined the legal and historical rationale for invoking Royal Separation Protocol 14-7, a framework originating from the abdication crisis of Edward VIII and designed to protect the monarchy from internal discord. The public, however, would only become aware when the Royal Gazette published a terse one-line notice: the Duke of Sussex will no longer be accorded sovereign privileges, travel protections, or institutional representation within the United Kingdom, effective immediately. The reaction was electric. Shock, intrigue, and an undercurrent of relief rippled through the country. Polling the next morning indicated that 68% of Britons approved of the decision, signalling strong support for William's decisive action. In Montecito, the reaction was starkly different. Harry stared at the decree on his iPad, his surroundings dim, the children asleep, and Meghan in another room consulting legal counsel via video call. He reread the concluding line repeatedly. No return shall be contemplated until the children's full legal identities are submitted, verified, and recognized by the Crown. The words were more than a rejection. They were a challenge, one that blurred personal grievance with institutional authority. The monarchy would no longer treat familial disobedience as private drama. It had become a matter of national order, codified in law and protocol. Meanwhile, Lady Louise Windsor, newly appointed at just 22 as the royal legal liaison, prepared to assume her unprecedented role in the public and legal spotlight. She had co-authored a confidential report detailing ambiguities in the birth documentation and legal status of Archie and Lilibet. Before the Privy Council, her voice slightly trembling, she stated, "No biometric verification has been submitted to the Home Office for either child. There is no formal residence verification within the United Kingdom, nor any recognised legal custodial guardian under the Royal Household Charter." The room, usually filled with polite murmurs and ceremonial stoicism, fell into a profound hush. These were no longer speculative whispers, they were verified institutional findings. Lord Pembroke then made a historic announcement: the establishment of the House of Windsor Domestic Tribunal, an internal royal court tasked with adjudicating succession disputes, custodial matters, and abuses of privilege. For the first time in modern constitutional history, intra-royal legal authority had been formally codified to ensure accountability and preserve the monarchy's integrity. Adding to the shift in alignment, Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, submitted a handwritten note to William, endorsing the decision. Only when the line is drawn can the people trust the crown again. William placed the note in his personal archives, a quiet acknowledgement of realignment even within those previously sympathetic to Meghan and Harry. Days later, the palace orchestrated a subtle but symbolically potent gesture. 2 unmarked car seats, unmistakably intended for children, were discreetly loaded onto a private RAF Northolt aircraft. The pilot manifest listed the operation simply as Special Custody Transfer Awaiting Clearance. Speculation ignited immediately. Had Harry offered to relinquish custody voluntarily? Was a confidential agreement in place? An anonymous Montecito source leaked that Harry had indeed expressed willingness to step away entirely. "If it protects them, I'll let them go. I just want peace." Meghan, however, was reportedly steadfast in retaining custody claims, viewing the children as central to her public narrative and long-term brand. Legal advisers were observed arriving and departing Montecito in irregular patterns, fueling rumours of a potential international custody conflict in The Hague. Inside the palace, William consulted with Anne. Minimal words were exchanged, but the weight of shared understanding was immense. Charles, though exhausted from the continuous pressures of reign and oversight, remained resolute. The monarchy had progressed a step closer to William's envisioned model. Titles would not act as shields, and bloodlines could not excuse breaches of duty. The formal announcement followed, precisely at 9 a.m. in Buckingham Palace's courtyard. Flanked by the Lord Chamberlain and the Archbishop of Canterbury, William's press secretary delivered the message as the royal seal glistened against the cold morning air. In keeping with precedent and moral duty, and having reviewed the outcome of the private royal court deliberations, His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, has issued a sovereign recommendation to permanently withhold the reinstatement of any royal titles, privileges, or ceremonial roles for Prince Henry of Sussex. The announcement confirmed that the House disciplinary mandate, modelled on King Charles's precedent with Prince Andrew, had been formally invoked. William's rationale was explicit. If Charles could override Queen Elizabeth's dying wish to protect the dignity of the institution, the same principle applied to his brother. Harry was officially classified as a non-participating former royal, stripped of succession rights, ceremonial duties, and crown funding. His legal petition for reinstatement was archived with prejudice, cementing his exclusion. However, the announcement also embedded forward-looking safeguards. Lady Louise Windsor, representing the Royal Legal Commission, clarified that Archie and Lilibet were not automatically entitled to royal succession protections. Their custody, welfare, and future status would now be determined by merit, integrity, and transparency, not by inheritance alone. Louise emphasised, "This is a clear response to growing concern that Meghan Markle might leverage the children's titles to demand benefits or political influence in the UK or Commonwealth realms." This legal and procedural rigour marked an unprecedented moment in constitutional history. The custody of royal-adjacent minors, if contested, would fall under a specialised House Court created to adjudicate succession fraud, ethical endangerment, and misuse of institutional prestige. Even Sarah Ferguson publicly recognised the necessity of firm action. Only with firm, unapologetic lines drawn between merit and chaos can the royal family survive this media age. This is not exile. It is preservation. Leaked communications from Montecito suggested Harry's emotional state was deteriorating. He reportedly contemplated abandoning all claims to titles, custody, and influence. Meghan, however, remained unwavering, signalling that a legal battle over custody and influence could eclipse even the most infamous Windsor scandals. The royal communiqué concluded with William's signature and one final definitive line: "I follow, not only in the King's footsteps, but in the duty we owe to the people." not as brothers, but as guardians of history. Ambiguity was impossible. The torch had passed. The door was closed. Forgiveness existed, but never at the expense of the crown. When Harry read the declaration on his lockdown iPad, he reportedly sat in stunned silence for 20 minutes. The realization that not only he, but also Archie and Lilibet's future had been legally and institutionally locked down was devastating. The Lineage Safeguard Clause, a rarely invoked statute dating back to the early 20th century and revised after both the Duke of Windsor's abdication and Lord Mountbatten's assassination, was officially invoked. William and Charles ratified the clause, barring Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor from royal trust entitlements, property claims, or ceremonial placements until they reach the age of 21, and only then upon successfully passing a full ethics and identity audit administered by the Crown Court. In effect, their royal identity has been paused indefinitely. Meghan Markle's response was neither composed nor diplomatic. Shortly after the announcement, she allegedly stormed out of a private planning session with her publicist and crisis communications team. Leaked footage captured Meghan pacing her Montecito estate's veranda in athletic gear, yelling into a phone, "They can't freeze my children out. I built their global identity. I gave them the brand." That final line, "I gave them the brand," went viral within hours. Critics immediately jumped on the phrasing as proof of what many had long suspected. Meghan viewed Archie and Lilibet not as individuals, but as assets within her public relations empire. A scathing editorial in The Spectator ran the headline, "The Grandmother, Meghan's monetization of royal bloodline collapses in real time." While the King and William maintained a measured silence post-declaration, it was Duchess Sophie, wife of Prince Edward, who made the first post-fallout public appearance, delivering a speech at the Royal Family Ethics Symposium at Cambridge. Without naming names, Sophie stated, "No child should be wielded as a pawn, a product or a passport. Nobility is not in the title, but in how you protect the name that title bears." Audience members gave a rare standing ovation. Behind the scenes, Sophie has reportedly become a key figure in drafting the Windsor Code of Conduct, a formal set of ethical expectations for anyone bearing the royal surname, regardless of active title status. This includes guidelines around personal branding, media appearances, inheritance claims, and children's legal representation. Insiders claim the code was drafted in anticipation of a Sussex custody battle. Even as emotional turmoil mounted, another reality began to close in. Financial collapse documents obtained by the Daily Ledger show that Montecito Estate's property taxes for 2026 are overdue by over $134,000. Combined with the collapse of Archwell's donor base and Netflix's rumoured early exit clause worth $24 million. Prince Harry is now, according to insiders, bleeding cash and emotional resilience. One former Sussex business consultant warned he's dangerously close to defaulting on the Montecito mortgage. Meghan's personal trust fund was restructured last year. He doesn't have access. The palace lifeline is gone. Even more damning was the revelation that Harry quietly reached out to Tyler Perry for emergency bridge financing, a request which, per sources close to Perry, was declined. The reason wasn't personal, it was reputational. No one wants to bankroll a man being locked out by both his birth family and the American public, the source explained. In an extraordinary moment of candour, Prince William's senior aide confirmed to Windsor Insider that the brothers had one final phone call before the decision was made public. Harry asked, "So that's it? You're just cutting me off forever?" And William said, "No, I'm letting you go because you refuse to let go of what broke us." The call ended in silence. This detail, while deeply emotional, underscored that Prince William did not act impulsively or out of vengeance. The decision was institutional, not personal, and once made, it was final. Queen Camilla reportedly supported the stance, signalling rare alignment between Charles, William, Anne, Edward, and Camilla. Royal aides now refer to this posture as the Windsor blockade, a collective refusal to allow Harry and Meghan any back-channel return into the fold. This includes revoked diplomatic protection in the UK, legal severance of family communications, blocked access to personal royal archives, and a formal rejection of the children's inclusion in the updated line of succession registry. A newly published internal Crown document lists Archie and Lilibet as out-of-status descendants, OSD, the first such designation in modern royal history. Meghan has allegedly signed a preliminary deal to co-author a tell-all memoir titled The Crown Kept My Children, a move legal analysts warn could breach multiple non-disparagement clauses from the 2020 exit negotiations. The book, due later this year, is seen as her nuclear option, but palace advisors believe it will not spark sympathy. It will merely validate the Windsor doctrine that silence is not weakness, but strength and discipline. Buckingham Palace's eastern wing, once dimly lit by history's shadows, had turned into a fully illuminated command centre. Lord Pembroke returned to the lectern in the Royal Gallery to read what would become the most sweeping custodial verdict in House of Windsor's modern memory. By royal authority, under the full advisory of the Family Oversight Council, His Royal Highness Prince William of Wales, acting sovereign, hereby declares the legal and logistical revocation of all internal custodial rights concerning the minors known as Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor by their biological mother, Rachel Meghan Markle. The United Kingdom's monarchy had created a royal family custodial tribunal, distinct from any civil family court, empowered by the 2024 Succession Reform Charter. Princess Anne laid the groundwork quietly over 2 years, and Lady Louise Windsor finalised the framework for isolating royal minors from media exploitation, marital instability, and transatlantic legal loopholes. The tribunal cited over 12 distinct grounds, including Meghan's violations of the 2020 Sussex Agreement, her for-profit use of the children's titles, and a pattern of strategic misinformation in public disclosures. Key evidence included metadata from photoshopped family Christmas cards and internal Netflix memos linking releases to confidential pediatric appointments. Lady Louise stated, "Their privacy is sold for leverage." Prince Harry was not present after weeks of emotional collapse and intercepted communications. He had reportedly signed a non-object agreement on the condition that the children be relocated, not to palace grounds, but to a neutral estate in Kent. Staff at this estate, formerly a country home used by Princess Margaret, would oversee Archie and Lilibet, guided by caretakers trained in trauma-informed child development. Princess Catherine, now formally titled Guardian General of Royal Minors, would retain spiritual and ceremonial oversight without daily involvement. "This is not a palace," Catherine said, "but it is peace." Meghan's reaction was swift, conveyed through her newly hired PR team. A social video surfaced showing her sitting beside 2 children's drawings, eyes brimming with tears. "They've erased my motherhood," she whispered. "They've stolen my babies because I wouldn't bow." But the public no longer bowed either. Hashtags like #ProtectTheLine and #CustodyNotCurrency trended globally. Legal experts weighed in, noting Meghan's prior claims of dual US citizenship for the children would not override protective jurisdiction under the Windsor Charter. Once residency was declared fraudulent, the final reinforcement came from Sarah Ferguson. "I once thought silence protected the Crown, but I have learned it protects abusers more. In this clarity, I support your ruling." 2 days after the tribunal ruling, a handwritten, unsigned letter from Harry surfaced, addressed simply to his children. "I loved you before titles. I love you now without them. One day you'll understand why I stepped back, but I hope you'll forgive me for what I couldn't stop." Security arrangements were immediately reinforced. Frogmore Cottage was placed under Crown Estate stewardship. Clarence House redefined the term royal heir, excluding all descendants of individuals stripped of titles due to institutional violations. In Scotland, Princess Anne quietly expanded the Family Affairs Office with an internal protocol code for containment of crises tied to reputational risk. Perhaps most haunting was the small change made at the royal family website. Beneath a grey and white portrait of King Charles, Prince William, Princess Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis, 2 names were no longer listed: Archie and Lilibet. A footnote read, "Status updated in accordance with Royal Custodial Tribunal Ruling 2026, halves." The page bore no fanfare, no emotion, just a date, and for those watching closely, it marked the end of not just an era, but of a lineage. As this unprecedented ruling continues to reverberate around the world, every update reshapes the narrative of modern royalty. For those following the story, your thoughts and discussions matter, so don't just watch from the sidelines. Join the conversation, share your perspective, and subscribe to stay informed on every new development in this historic royal saga.